We have a giant Category 5 hurricane that is currently barreling towards the west coast of Florida, and it's a bit of a mess. So there's a lot to say about it. The water in the Gulf is super warm. Super warm water supercharges hurricanes. This hurricane in particular underwent what's called rapid intensification, where it went from like a tropical storm all the way to a Category 5 hurricane within the course of like a day or two. It's like the third or fourth most powerful hurricane ever in the Atlantic. This is, so, I mean, Helene was a bitch, and the cleanup is going to be billions of dollars, and it could potentially impact the election. But this one will definitely impact the election. And so you have like mandatory evacuations all up the west coast of Florida. And you have like recommended evacuations, not mandatory, but recommended even for the people who are sort of inland in Florida. Because when you're in the path of a Category 5 hurricane, now to be fair, when it makes landfall, it should be like 4 or 3. In fact, I think it just turned 4 right now as I'm talking. But that's gonna, like, everything does damage in that scenario. So the thing you always have to worry about the most with hurricanes is storm surge and rain. People seem to think like, oh no, the wind is like the biggest thing. Wind can be a giant problem, especially right on the coast. And especially if it's up there in the Category 3, 4, 5 range. It can do a lot of damage, can take down houses, etc. Right? But the real killer, statistically, it's the storm surge, which is when the ocean basically comes inland and swamps everything, and the flooding, the freshwater flooding from the rain. Right? So Florida is already in a situation where, I don't know how many of you guys have been there, but in a lot of places in Florida, just like a normal thunderstorm will kind of make it look like the roads are like flooded a little bit. Right? And so when you're talking about a hurricane and it's just dumping down a foot of rain, and on top of that, on the coast, you have anywhere between a 6-foot to a 15-foot storm surge. We're talking apocalyptic. That's what we're talking about here. So let me show you. Here we have a meteorologist, and he's talking about Hurricane Milton, and he's literally going to tear up about it. Let's go.
It's just an incredible, incredible, incredible hurricane. It has dropped 50 millibars.
He's crying. What he's describing is the pressure is dropping. When the pressure drops, the storm gets stronger. That's what he's talking about.
In 10 hours. I apologize. This is just horrific. Maximum sustained winds are 160 miles per hour, and it is just gaining strength in the Gulf of Mexico, where you can imagine the winds. I mean, the seas are just so incredibly, incredibly hot, record hot, as you might imagine. You know what's driving that. I don't need to tell you. Global warming, climate change, leading to this and becoming an increasing threat for the Yucatan, including Merida and Progreso and other areas there. Let's see if I can show you the latest. There's the Cat 5 information. Winds 160 miles per hour, moving east-southeast at 9 miles per hour. And on that track, you're going to notice that this system is going to come very, very close to the Yucatan. And the dirty side of this hurricane, folks, is on the right-hand side of its progress. So therefore, they're going to get the dirty side there. These communities, many of them, as you might imagine, many folks, in that area have just the very basics, nothing else but that. So it's going to be very tough. Now let's transition to Florida, because even though it is expected to weaken on approach, it is so incredibly strong right now that you're going to find it very difficult for it to be nothing less than a major hurricane when it makes landfall in Florida.
Now, Tampa in particular, they built in Tampa like they have the IQ of orangutans. Like they literally right at sea level. One of their major hospitals is like right at sea level on a little barrier island. I mean, it's just like the last time a major hurricane hit Tampa was 1921, and it seems like a lot of people moved to Florida, and it's just like a lot of arrogance is showing, where it's like, yeah, we'll just build in these places, it'll be all right. And it's like, nah, bro, you guys are all on borrowed time, dog. And so right now, as I talk to you, it looks like the path is going to be a little bit south of Tampa, which would be great for Tampa, but you're still probably going to have, 6-foot storm surge at least, something like that. But it's heading more for Fort Myers or Sarasota, I should say. But it's apocalyptic. Now, you heard the dude. You heard him. He said climate change. He said it. He said it's climate change. That's like, and the right is so close to getting it, but they're not getting it. Now, their big conspiracy is that Democrats have a giant hurricane machine and they're making these hurricanes to barrel over conservative areas to help them in the election. That's literally their belief. But here's the thing. These hurricanes aren't man-made in the sense that they think it is, but they are kind of man-made with climate change, with us pumping, fossil fuels into the atmosphere on a regular basis, day in and day out, for decades and decades and decades and decades. And of course, every time they study this, they're like, oh, it looks like it's actually worse than what we thought was the worst case scenario. This is where we're at. This is what we're seeing. This is what's happening. So look, I'll ask you guys, how many years in a row, or how many like every other year do you hear this where it's like 1 in 1,000-year storm or 1 in 100,000-year storm? And it's like, really? We had one a year ago. We had one 2 years ago. At what point is that like, hey, wakey here? Something's got to give. Something's got to give. And so the other aspect of this is FEMA, right? So Biden, there's a lot of misinformation out there about what went on with the disaster response to both Helene and now to Milton. They gave the approval. They declared the state of emergency. They released the FEMA funds instantly with Helene. They've already done it for Milton, knowing it's going to be a disaster. So they're doing everything they can on that front. But the fact of the matter is, FEMA does need more money. Well, guess what? Democrats want to give FEMA more money. Mike Johnson is blocking it. The Republican. Like, what do you say about that? These people would literally be okay with some of their own voters dying, not having the resources they need in order to score a cheap political win and say, the Democrats didn't deliver on FEMA, even though we're the ones who blocked it, right? So, and also, gotta call a spade, Ron DeSantis took the words climate change out of every single Florida government document. And this is one of the states that is going to be most impacted by climate change. And here we are. So, just horrible. I hope everybody who's in the storm path evacuated. Because, and by the way, there's a mayor who came out and said this, a mayor in Florida. She was like, look, if you're in a mandatory evacuation zone and you don't evacuate, you're going to die. That's what she said. And I mean, you can only scream it from the rooftop so many times before, people need to listen. People need to listen. And some people are not going to listen. And so you're going to have a tremendous death toll from this storm, most likely, right? So just terrible. But here we go again. 1 in 1,000-year storm, 1 in 100,000-year storm, etc. Here we are. It's happening again. And now we got literal meteorologists crying on TV because of the devastation and linking it directly to climate change. But you'll still have plenty of people go, meh, not buying it. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop. And watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.